only for colonial past and Britain's interference on our island. Last year we honoured John Mahoney, the forgotten soldier, murdered by the Free State, buried in an unmarked grave. He too paid the ultimate price for believing in the ideals and principles of the 1916 Rising. Moved from Kilkenny prison so he would not be seen as dying a Republican martyr in a Free State prison, his mother knew the authorities' intention, and in a letter written in the 30s while applying for a pension for John's service, she wrote, "The authorities, by moving John from Kilkenny jail to Cashel poorhouse, knew what they were doing. They made sure my son died, a pauper, not a hero. It might have taken us 100 years to uncover John's story, but now he is rightfully remembered and is a hero here locally and will forever be remembered. Before that, we stood beside our bravest of the brave, the men of the 3rd Tipperary Brigade, IRA, in February last year, and I was honoured to give the oration, my first one, for Paddy McDonagh and Denny Lacey. Two great Tipperary men who, like Tom Clark, had a real love of their country. They were the principal few who refused to bend the knee to a foreign occupier and their homegrown supporters. This is part of our culture, our history. It is what makes us who we are. Father Geoffrey Keating is buried in Tubred, just a few miles from here. He was hunted by the British just because he dared to collect and write down our ancient Irish history. The British were attempting to erase our culture, our Irish identity. Our ancient symbol, the harp, that fantastic musical instrument, was also a target of British repression. Cromwell's army tried to finish the harps of Tipperary. Thousands of harps were torn from walls of cabins where they were regarded as sacred. They failed, and their efforts to rid Tipperary of our culture and tradition failed. Today, we have a hate speech law that is trying to do similar. Isn't it amazing that this is happening in the very country that was always a beacon for culture, the land whose monks travelled Europe to collect banned manuscripts and save them? Thomas James Clark was born in England on March the 11th, 1858. His father James hailed from Carrigal in Leitrim and his mother Mary Palmer from here in Clogheen. In 1883, Tom took part in the Dynamite campaign, initiated by the famous Fenian Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa. An informer infiltrated the movement, and in June 1883, at the age of 25, Tom was sentenced to penal servitude and sent to Chatham Prison, one of the toughest prisons in England. In 1898, Tom was released on licence, aged 40. He was reunited with his mum and sister Hannah, but his father had died in 1894. He met his wife, Kathleen, while visiting his friend and fellow Fenian John Daly in Limerick. John was the city's first nationalist mayor. Unable to find work in Ireland, the engaged couple emigrated and were married in 1901. From 1906 to 1907, they ran a market garden in Long Island, America. Tom felt a war in Europe was on the horizon in which Britain would be embroiled, and knew this would be to Eyre's advantage. Tom persuaded Kathleen to return home, and she knew this was his life's ambition and would not stand in his way. In 1908, Tom established a tobacconist shop in Parnell Street. Tom worked over the next few years, leading up to the rising and re-establishing an IRB movement, working with Bulmer Hobson and the great Sean McDermott. Tom never lost sight of his lifelong ambition to free Ireland, all 32 counties of British occupation. In 1915, we had the great Republican funeral of O'Donovan Rossa. Tom chose a teacher, Patrick Pearse, to give the oration, and the famous words of advice were issued by Tom to Pearse: "Make it as hot as hell." In 1916, Tom Clark was 59 years old. The hard years he had spent in prison had left its mark on him physically. Mentally, he was still an unrepentant Fenian, and it was this love of his native land that drove him on. On the Tuesday, the 18th of April of Easter week 1916, Kathleen describes Tom coming home late in a joyous and excited mood. He informed her that the rising was fixed to start on the following Sunday, that a proclamation had been drawn to which he was the first signatory. Tom had asked not to be the first, but he explained how Thomas MacDonagh had spoke and said, "You, sir, By your example, your courage, your enthusiasm have led us younger men to where we are today. He then said if Tom did not agree to accept it, he would not sign it. Tom agreed, and at that meeting, Tom as first signatory became president, and Pearse was made Commander-in-Chief of Ireland and Connolly Commander of Dublin. Kathleen describes a feeling of her world falling apart around her as she listened to Tom, who she described as being wild with excitement. I did not want to dampen his spirit. Though I knew the rising had to be, I could see no military success against the British Empire. Tom continued normal life as the RIC and G-men were keeping a close eye on him. Kathleen took the 3 kids to Limerick so she would be free to fulfil her role in coming them on during the rising. The plan to rise on Sunday was called off when McNeill realised a rising was to happen. He issued countermanding orders. Despite this, the rising did go ahead on the Monday. Tom Clark was the first to enter the GPO and described to Kathleen in Kilmainham after the rising how he had shot the lock off the door in the GPO and ordered all inside out with their hands up. He also recounted that he had led the last charge out of the GPO. He spent the week encouraging and advising. On the 29th of April, the surrender was issued in Moore Street. They debated what to do, and Tom was the only one who was against surrendering. All the participants from the GPO were herded into a garden in front of the rotunda. A British officer called Lee Wilson treated Tom deplorably, and this was not forgotten, with Wilson being shot by the IRA a few years later. Kathleen was brought to Kilmainham to visit him, and she described Tom as being in an exalted state of mind. He told her, "My comrades and I believe we have struck the first successful blow for freedom, and so sure as we are going out this morning, so sure will freedom come as a direct result of our action. It will not come today or tomorrow, and between this and freedom, Ireland will go through hell, but she will never lie down again until she has attained full freedom. With this belief, we die happy. I am happy and satisfied at what we have accomplished." Tom Clark was executed on May the 3rd, 1916, with Patrick Pearse and another great Tipperary man to remember today, Thomas MacDonagh. Kathleen lost a baby shortly after the rising. She went on to become a senator and TD and was elected Dublin's Lord Mayor in 1939. She died in 1972, aged 94. To finish with a quote from Thomas Kent, who was executed, the great Cork man, in 1916. "Accursed be the false tongue of the raider. Accursed be the sons of the Gael who would aid her. Let him who feels shame for his ancestor's story be gone from our pathway. Let ours be the glory." Thank you very much. Berbua.
Seamus Hennessy will now play 2 tunes.